Okay, let's unpack this. So, when you close your eyes and picture like a real fantasy novel horse,
Hmm.
you're probably seeing it, right? That coat, like black as night, the super long wavy mane and tail just everywhere, and those, feathery bits on their leg.
Yeah, the feathers.
They're the ones you see in movies, totally commanding the screen, dramatic, powerful, just really charismatic.
That's exactly it. We are definitely talking about the Friesian horse,
Mm.
a breed you know instantly when you see it, that look, that presence.
Oh, totally. They really nail that legendary image.
They do.
But, as amazing as they look, digging into the sources you shared, it's clear there's way more going on with Friesians. It's a history that goes way, way back. But it also comes with this surprising list of specific health challenges.
Right. So, yeah, our mission today is really to get into this collection of articles and research. We want to pull out the key stuff like where they actually came from, what makes them tick physically and temperamentally, understand the health hurdles the research shows they often face. And this is important, what the sources suggest about the best ways to, care for and feed these incredible animals. They're magnificent, but complex.
Definitely complex. And just starting out thinking about that image, that first impression,
Yeah.
what jumps out at you most about them? What grabs you and makes you want to dig deeper? Keep that with you as we go through this.
It's just how incredibly old their story is. The sources pin their origin firmly in Friesland, in the Netherlands.
Right.
And we're not talking just a few hundred years. There are illustrations showing horses that look a lot like modern Friesians going back to the 11th century.
Wow, the 11th century.
Yeah, and military records even hint that ancestors, sort of Friesian types,
Yeah.
were used as war horses by troops from that area way back in the 4th
The
century.
4th century. It's an almost unbelievable amount of history for one breed type. Were they always so distinct, or did other horses get mixed in?
Well, like a lot of really old breeds, yeah, there were influences. The sources mention Eastern blood, Arabian types coming in during the Middle Ages,
Ah.
with the Crusaders.
Yeah, okay.
And then later, 16th, 17th centuries, there was a big dose of Andalusian blood from Spain. That definitely shaped their look, their movement.
So you got that Spanish elegance, a bit of Middle Eastern flair mixed into that old Dutch foundation.
Pretty much. But here's something the sources really stress. Even with those inputs, modern genetic work shows Friesians are actually quite distinct. They're kind of isolated, genetically speaking, from other Dutch breeds.
Interesting.
And unlike so many European riding horses today, they don't really have much, if any, English thoroughbred ancestry. That really sets them apart.
I saw a term in the sources, landrace, that was kind of new to me in this horse context. What's that about?
Yeah, it's a cool concept. It basically means the early development wasn't driven by formal breeding programs like we think of now.
Okay.
Instead, a landrace is shaped over ages by its specific place, the environment, the climate, and how the local people use them. The Friesian type just grew out of Friesland through practical use and adapting, long before anyone wrote down breed standards.
Gotcha. Which brings us to when they did get formally recognized.
Yeah.
Much later, right? 1879.
That's the date, yep. And the main authority, the KFPS in the Netherlands, the Royal Friesian Stud Book, that's the original registry. They're all about keeping the breed pure and sticking to the standards. FIA is their North American branch, doing the same thing over here.
And those standards involve, stud books and inspections? Sounds pretty strict.
Oh, they are. It's what's called a closed stud book, really focused on maintaining that specific Friesian type. To get a horse registered in the main book, it absolutely has to be from a registered mare and sired by an approved stallion.
Approved. So not just any registered stallion.
Exactly. Stallions go through this intense, multi-step inspection and testing process. They look at conformation, movement, temperament, and critically, whether the stallion is likely to, improve the breed going forward. Mares and geldings get inspected too to make it into the main stud book.
Going back to their history, what kind of jobs did they actually do? They weren't just looking pretty back then, surely.
No way. They were incredibly versatile. Started as all-around working horses, then they became famous as war mounts for knights in the Middle Ages.
Really? Knights?
Yeah, there's good historical reason to believe guys like William the Conqueror probably rode Friesian-type horses. Then they became these elegant coach horses for the rich folks, and later, popular harness racers, trotters, prized for that flashy style.
Wow, warhorse, coach horse, trotter. Quite the resume. But then the sources say their numbers just crashed.
Yeah, they fell hard out of fashion in the late 19th century. Other harness breeds came up, transportation changed. It got bad, really bad. Get this. By 1902, The sources say there are only 15 approved stallions left in Friesland.
15. Seriously. That is unbelievably close to just disappearing.
It really is. One of the most startling facts about them. Just 15. How did they even survive that?
Yeah, how did they come back?
Well, they'd actually been brought to North America way earlier by Dutch settlers. But crossbreeding here meant the purebreds almost vanished here, too. The modern comeback really started with a fresh reintroduction to North America in the 1970s.
Ah, okay.
And now they're hugely popular again. High demand for riding, driving, kind of full circle, back from the absolute brink.
What a roller coaster. Ancient roots, near extinction, now back in the spotlight. And that spotlight is definitely on their look. Let's break down those breed characteristics the sources talk about.
Yeah, their appearance is just, it's fundamental. You know a Friesian when you see one.
So tell us about their build, their conformation. What's the ideal?
Okay, so the sources give a good picture. Height-wise, usually between 15.2 and 16 hands. Some get bigger, maybe up to 17 hands. And there are minimum heights to get into the stud book, like 15 hands for mares and geldings, 15.3 for stallions by age 4.
And the overall look?
You want an expressive head, small ears, they say alert ears, big eyes, wide nostrils. Then that neck, it's got to be graceful, high-set, naturally arched, really muscular, flowing nicely into the withers.
And the body.
Muscular back, moderate length. Sometimes a slight dip is okay, apparently. Strong loins, broad, sloping croup. Shoulders should be long and sloping, too, leading to a strong chest, lots of room for the ribs. Legs need to be correct, straight, ending in good, wide, sound hooves. The whole picture should be kind of rectangular, balanced. Strong but elegant.
And their movement that's just as famous as the black coat.
Totally. The sources emphasize that desired gait, light-footed, really elevated, especially the trot. You want to see good reach, lots of bend in the joints, and power coming from behind. That high-stepping thing is classic Friesian.
Now, the color, is it only black these days?
Yep. For the modern breed registered with KFPS, black is the only color allowed. The sources do mention that way back, there were probably grays and bays.
Huh, interesting.
But today, strictly black. The only white marking they allow is a tiny little star on the forehead. Nothing else. No white on the legs or body if you want registration.
That solid black, plus all that hair.
Exactly. The super long, thick black mane and tail are signatures. And that heavy feathering on the lower legs, it all adds up to that dramatic look.
Beyond how they look, what are they like, temperament-wise?
Generally, the sources describe them as pretty genuine, willing workers. Good work ethic, good stamina, but not typically spooty, which is nice.
Yeah.
They're considered smart, quick learners if you train them well, usually friendly, pretty easygoing, suitable for lots of different riders, though, every horse is an individual.
With that look and movement, they seem born for the show ring. What disciplines do they really shine in?
Well, yeah, their look and action make them show favorites. Harness shows, driving, that's a natural fit, right? Goes back to the carriage horse days, shows off that fancy trot.
Makes sense. And under saddle?
Dressage. That's probably the most popular riding job for them. You see them competing at all levels, doing well. Although the sources do point out that at the very, very top, like Grand Prix level, the modern warm bloods tend to dominate.
Okay.
But outside of serious competition, loads of them are used for pleasure riding, hitting the trails, even a bit of light farm work still.
And like you said right at the start, they're movie stars.
Oh yeah, perfect look for film, TV. The sources mention examples like Mask of Zorro, Sense and Sensibility, Lady Hawk. They just look epic on screen.
Are there things they're generally not suited for?
Yeah, the sources usually say because of their build, their type, they're generally not the top pick for, say, endurance riding or high-level show jumping. Okay, so now we get into a really crucial part of this deep dive. Because as gorgeous and trainable as they are, the sources are really clear. The Friesian breed carries some significant health predispositions.
Right, and this links directly back to that history we talked about, doesn't it? That tiny gene pool.
Absolutely. That whole story of coming back from just 15 stallions. Well, it means they have very limited genetic diversity. And the inbreeding needed to rebuild the breed, unfortunately, means certain genetic diseases and other health problems pop up more often. It can even affect how long they live. The research suggests their average lifespan might be shorter than many other breeds, sometimes maybe only around 16 years or so.
Wow, 16 years. That's quite a contrast to their powerful look, knowing they might have a shorter life. What are some of these specific genetic things the sources highlight?
Well, dwarfism is one they discuss. It's an autosomal recessive condition, meaning A foal has to inherit the faulty gene from both parents to actually have dwarfism. Affected foals have this distinct look. Broad chest, really short limbs, but their head and back usually look normal size.
Okay.
The big problem is severe hyperextension in their fetlocks. The joints kind of collapse forward. It makes walking abnormal and leads to a high risk of injury.
That sounds really difficult to manage. Can breeders avoid it?
Yes, and this is a positive point from the sources. There's DNA testing available now. Breeders can test their horses and find out if they carry the gene.
Ah, good.
So responsible breeders can avoid mating two carriers together, which prevents affected foals being born. The sources do say that while it's challenging, some dwarf horses can live fairly normal lifespans with a lot of care.
And there was another serious one mentioned, hydrocephalus.
Yeah, hydrocephalus is
Yeah.
devastating. Also autosomal recessive. It's basically excess fluid building up inside the brain. It causes the head to look swollen, distended, and causes severe neurological problems. The outlook is really grim. Often it results in stillbirth, or if the foal is born alive, euthanasia is usually needed very quickly.
That's absolutely heartbreaking. Is there testing for that one too?
Thankfully, yes.
Yeah.
There's also a DNA test for hydrocephalus. So again, breeders can test their stock and make breeding choices to avoid producing affected foals. It's a really vital tool for reducing how often this awful condition occurs.
The sources also spent some time on connective tissue abnormalities. How does that play into their health picture?
This is a really fascinating and slightly complex area the sources delve into. The research suggests Friesians might have breed-specific differences in how their bodies make or break down collagen.
It's collagen. That's the stuff that holds tissues together, right? Like tendons, ligaments.
Exactly. It's a framework for all that connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, even the walls of blood vessels. Yeah. And here's the really interesting hypothesis the sources present. The selective breeding over time for those really impressive high-stepping gaits might have accidentally favored horses with maybe slightly looser tendons or a particular type of collagen structure.
Ah, so the very thing we admire, that flashy movement, might be linked to a weakness.
That seems to be the theory. This potential predisposition for, let's say, less robust connective tissue is thought to be a contributing factor to several different health problems seen more often in the breed.
Wow. Okay, so what specific problems might stem from this potential collagen issue?
Several are mentioned. One is megaesophagus. This is where the esophagus, the tube from the mouth to the stomach, gets enlarged and floppy, loses its muscle tone.
Right.
This makes swallowing really hard. Food can get stuck. That's choke if they can lose weight. And there's a risk of aspiration pneumonia if food goes down the wrong way into the lungs. The sources directly link this to those suspected collagen issues, possibly causing the esophagus wall to dilate and lose tone.
Can they fix megaesophagus?
There's no cure, unfortunately. But it can be managed. The sources talk about things like feeding special soupy mashes or pellets, often from a raised feeder, to use gravity to help. And importantly, they recommend not breeding horses that have the condition.
The most frightening condition linked to this collagen thing seemed to be aortic rupture.
Yes, that one is. It's extremely serious.
Yeah.
It's basically when the aorta, the body's main artery coming off the heart, tears or bursts.
Oh, gosh.
It almost always leads to sudden death, often with very little warning. It's thought to be another possible outcome of these underlying collagen weaknesses affecting the strength of the blood vessel walls.
That is absolutely terrifying. Are there any warning signs people might see beforehand?
Sometimes, maybe. The sources list potential signs, but stress they aren't always there and can be vague. Things like unexplained colic episodes, maybe a resting heart rate that's higher than normal, swelling in the legs, a fever, a really strong bounding pulse, sudden lameness, maybe nosebleeds or swollen joints. The absolute key message from the sources is, if you see any of those signs in your Friesian, call the vet immediately. But tragically, there's no treatment once a rupture happens.
That really underscores needing to know these risks. What other common health things did the sources bring up?
Skin problems. They seem pretty common in Friesians. Chronic pastern dermatitis, mud fever or scratches happens a lot, likely because those thick feathers trap moisture and dirt right against the skin.
Makes sense.
And insect bite hypersensitivity, or sweet itch, is another big one. Studies mentioned in the sources suggest it affects a fair chunk of the breed, maybe up to 18%.
Right.
There was an interesting note about a study that found supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids helped reduce the skin lesions in horses with that insect allergy.
Oh, that's a practical tip. Any other sort of unusual predispositions?
Yes, one really striking statistic is the high rate of retained placenta in Friesian mares after they foal. The number quoted is up to 54%,
54%. Compared to what normally?
compared to less than 10% in the general horse population. It's a huge difference, really significant.
Wow, that is huge. And lastly, the sources mention equine metabolic syndrome, EMS.
Yeah, they touch on EMS risk.
Okay.
Well, maybe there isn't as much large-scale formal research specifically on Friesians compared to, say, ponies. The sources say vets definitely report seeing them as predisposed. Lots of reports of hyperinsulinemia, high insulin levels.
Okay.
The thinking is it might tie back to their history, maybe adapting to a harsher environment, plus those Arabian and Andalusian influences we talked about.
And the main dangers with EMS are obesity and...
Laminitis. Critically, laminitis. That extremely painful hoof condition. So owners really need to watch for signs of EMS, especially that abnormal fatty crest developing on the neck. It looks different from the strong muscular neck of a fit Friesian. Also, sometimes fat pads can appear above the eyes. If you suspect EMS, definitely get your vet involved for testing. So with all these potential health hurdles, it becomes super clear why, really proactive, tailored care and management are just absolutely vital for Friesians, not just to survive, but to really do well.
Yeah, it sounds like being vigilant, catching things early, and having a solid preventative plan is just essential, non-negotiable.
Exactly. The sources really hammer home building a strong preventative wellness strategy. Regular vet checkups are key, obviously, for catching any of those breed issues early, keeping up with vaccines, parasite control based on vet advice, all crucial.
And teeth. Can't forget the teeth.
Definitely not. Yearly dental checks, floating, maybe more often for older horses or ones with known issues. Good teeth are just fundamental for everything else.
Hoof care, too. I imagine that's extra important with the connective tissue stuff possibly in the background.
Critically important, yes. The sources highlight the huge role of a good, knowledgeable farrier. Even though many Friesians have decent feet naturally, that potential connective tissue weakness means proper, regular trims, maybe corrective shoeing sometimes, is vital.
Why is that so important?
It's all about maintaining soundness and reducing any extra stress on those tendons, ligaments, and joints. Frequent farrier visits are often needed.
What about just letting them be horses? Exercise, turnout?
Hugely important. The sources stress how much free movement and turnout helps with bone density, connective tissue health. It cuts down on stress, lets them just be horses. Trying to minimize time stuck in a stall is definitely recommended.
And then there's the hair, all that glorious hair. Grooming must be a big job.
Oh, it's definitely a commitment. Friesians need more grooming time on a lot of breeds, that's for sure. Keeping those feathers on the lower legs clean and dry is really key to preventing that pastern dermatitis, the mud fever. And daily brushing, coat, that amazing mane and tail, the feathers. You need the right tools and the time.
Any tricks for managing the mane and tail length? They get so long.
Yeah, the sources suggest pulling the mane, taking out longer hairs from underneath rather than just cutting it straight across so it lies better. Braiding helps keep it tidy too. Tails, you can let them grow long or trim them to hock or fetlock level for practical reasons. Feathers too, trim or leave natural, depends on your setup.
You mentioned they might tire a bit quicker than some other breeds. How does that affect training?
It just means you need to be thoughtful about their training program. Ideally, work with a vet and a trainer who knows Friesians. And owners need to be super observant.
Okay.
The sources really emphasize watching for any signs of unusual fatigue, poor performance, or anything suggesting heart trouble, especially with that aortic rupture risk looming. Any weird heart rate? Call the vet immediately.
Some meticulous care, informed care across the board, which leads us nicely into nutrition. Seems like another cornerstone for managing their health.
It really is. Balanced nutrition is just fundamental. It supports everything, their well-being, their performance, and critically helps manage those specific breed risks we've been talking about.
And weight management seems like priority number one nutritionally.
It's presented as probably the most critical factor in the sources because they tend to be easy keepers. They put on weight easily.
Right.
And that extra weight is seriously bad news for them. It puts huge stress on their joints, their connective tissues, and it ramps up the risk for EMS and that insulin resistance problem.
So being overweight basically magnifies their existing vulnerabilities. How do you track their weight properly?
Body condition scoring, or BCS, is the tool the sources recommend. Aim for that ideal 5 out of 9 on the Henneke scale. They make a point that too much fat, especially that lumpy crust on the neck, distinct from a fit, muscular neck or fat pads over the eyes, strongly correlates with insulin resistance and EMS risk. Managing weight before it becomes a problem is key.
What should form the base of their diet then?
Forage. Hay, primarily. That should be the absolute foundation. Giving them free choice access, if possible, is generally best for their digestive health.
Okay.
Rule of thumb is they'll eat about 2% of their body weight in hay per day, just for maintenance. Maybe up to 2.5% if they're in regular work.
Can you put that into pounds or kilos?
Sure, so like a 1,300-pound Friesian, that's around 590 kilos, would need about 26 pounds or 12 kilos of hay a day, just hanging out.
Got it. And for these easy keepers, what kind of hay?
The advice is generally mid-maturity grass hay, lower in starch and sugar. Specifically, they talk about keeping hydrolyzable carbohydrates HC under 10%.
What if the horse is working hard and needs more calories?
You could use higher quality forage, like alfalfa, that gives more energy, more protein. The calcium can be good for stomach health too, but you have to balance the minerals, especially phosphorus, and it's not great for older geldings who might get bladder stones.
Right.
And a big warning, if a horse is eating higher energy hay, say with HCs over 10%, and suddenly stops working, they can gain weight super fast, and the laminitis risk shoots way up.
Okay, important caution. And for a Friesian that's already overweight?
Then you need to restrict intake carefully. Suggestions include limiting hay to maybe 1.5% of their ideal body weight, using slow feeder nets to make meals last longer, maybe a grazing muzzle if they're on pasture. Getting your hay analyzed is really helpful too, so you know exactly what you're feeding.
The sources also warned against high-starch grains. Why specifically for Friesians?
Well, high starch can cause digestive upset in any horse, but it might be worse if they're stressed, like from training or travel. Plus, it's just extra calories they often don't need.
So what do you use for extra energy if needed?
The sources suggest alternatives like adding fat supplements or using fermentable fibers like beet pulp. Forage cubes or pellets can also be good carriers to mix supplements into if you're not feeding grain.
Speaking of supplements, what did the sources highlight as potentially beneficial?
Omega-3 fatty acids got a definite mention. Good for joints, immune system, skin, and coat. And remember that study showing they helped Friesians with sweet itch.
Yeah, the skin lesion reduction. And the absolute basics, water, salt.
Non-negotiable. Always fresh, clean water. And plain loose salt, they recommend actually adding 1 to 2 ounces a day because horses often don't get enough just from a salt block.
Right.
Electrolytes as needed, like in hot weather or after hard work.
How should people approach supplements overall? Just add everything.
No, the philosophy is definitely balance the basics first. Use supplements to fill gaps identified, maybe through hay analysis, or to address specific needs. Get the forage right, maybe add a good vitamin-mineral balancer like the amniity they mentioned, then look at targeted support. Other specific ones they mentioned were W3 oil for those omega-3s and healthy inflammation response, MSM for comfortable movement, and Jaugalan.
Jaugalan. What's that for?
The sources describe it as supporting nitric oxide production, which is apparently important for healthy blood flow to tendons, ligaments, and hooves.
Interesting. The sources even mentioned an offer for a free diet evaluation. That sounds super helpful given how tricky managing their nutrition seems.
Yeah, that could be a really valuable resource for owners trying to get it just right for their specific horse.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone from those ancient Friesian roots, that dramatic brush with extinction, through their stunning looks and versatility, deep into the health vulnerabilities tied to that unique history, and finally, into the really crucial tailored care and nutrition they need.
It really does paint a picture, doesn't it? A breed that's as complex as it is beautiful. You see the power of breeding for certain traits, but also the heavy responsibility that comes with managing the genetic legacy of such a small founding population.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about the Friesian horse, with that almost mythical look and then the reality of the health challenges, isn't it fascinating how the very things we find so striking, like that elevated, powerful trot, might actually be interconnected with some of their biggest health risks. It really makes you stop and think about the delicate balance in breeding and the deep commitment needed to care for them properly, doesn't it?
You will also watch it on our channel. Horses. Horses for sale. Horseback riding near me. Horse riding near me. Star stable. Horseback riding. Horse riding. Equestrian. Pony. Wild horses. Black horse. Horses for sale. Horse for sale. Equine horses for sale. Horses. Horses for horse blankets. Schleich horses. Horse trailers for sale. Horse wormer. Horse tack. horse rescue near me, saddle pads, horse feed, stirrups, saddles, horse barns, horse painting, Western saddle, World Equestrian Center, ponies for sale, horse boarding near me, hobby horse stables, horse shoes, horse jumps, horses,